All right. Hello and welcome. This is episode 1 from Nobody Does Anything podcast. Today we're going to be addressing and talking about judging in cardistry. We're going to go over a little bit of... we're going to have Stan and Christopher go over some of the history of competitions, how judging was, their experiences in those competitions, because they've been around for a while. They've seen these, they've watched them, they've been a part of some of them. So let's start out with introductions as usual. I'm Spencer. Instagram is at sus.deck. Stan, Christopher, sorry. Christopher, go ahead.
Christopher at 52_squared.
And I'm Stan at Stan ZVLV.
And like before, they're going to be under our pictures anyways, in case you're wondering. So yes, before we get started on the main discussion, we are going to go into the underrated spotlight real quick, just like last episode. And let me get my screen share for this one set up. Christopher, if you want to introduce who we are going to be talking about.
Yeah. Today our underrated spotlight goes to Oyster, who I actually don't know his real name, but he just goes by Oyster. So I met this guy on Tiny Chat, and someone else, I forget who was on, but someone else knew him and was like, hey, check out his stuff. It's really good. And they were right. And he's, I think, really, truly underrated. One of those guys who has like just really solid cuts and, I mean, a great style. You can go ahead and play this cut, Spencer.
Yeah, sure. 1 second. This is his username, by the way.
Yeah.
See, only 180 followers.
Yeah.
So this is the first move.
Yeah, and I actually helped him with like the direction of this move, and it just turned out so nice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's a really cool move. It's got a great, like, strong theme to it with those folding packets. It just looks so nice.
Yeah, I like the opening mechanic.
Yeah.
Like the opener itself.
And I like the misdirection. Right, so when this packet goes back and reverses.
Oh yeah.
For the closer. I love misdirection in cuts. So you want me to play this one next?
Yeah. I thought this one was really cool too. It just has this cool kind of grabby motion in it, and like, yeah. You don't see a lot of moves like that. With like the long edge grips and then like just that kind of curling motion is really cool.
Yeah, it reminded me of Pesto.
Oh, yeah.
How it curls around the hand, which is really nice.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's a great move, yeah.
That one's called, I don't know. Doesn't have a name. Okay.
Nameless Flourish. Yeah, and then the red checkerboard one, yeah. I just thought this was a nice move as well. Very satisfying.
I am a personal fan of slowing down cuts. I think this would look great with some timing. Kind of like what Leo talked about in his first episode, is like some parts fast, some parts slow down. Because this has a lot of great mechanics and parts in the cut, but it seems almost like rushed through it. But I really like it. And I love the deck drop at the end.
Yeah, but it looks it looks pretty clean.
Oh, so, yeah, really clean.
Yeah.
He's really good with that.
Yeah. So definitely give him a follow if you like his stuff, and I can't wait to see what he puts out.
Yep, and this should be on the screen. I'm going to add it on the screen really big so you can't miss it. And all right, we back. All right, that was our underrated spotlight. Time to move on to the main discussion. This one's going to be a little bit, we're moving up the spiciness level every episode.
It's like hot ones. You just
Yeah, we're
The
just
sauce gets hotter, yeah.
we jumped up a lot of spots of spiciness since the last episode. That was just a warm up for y'all. Um, so the title of this episode, which you will already be able to see, but it felt complete. The problem with judging cardistry competitions. So we're gonna start out with I'm gonna let Stan and Christopher take over with a little bit of history of competitions and judging in those competitions and their experiences, like I said before. So, first person I'm going to hand it over to is Christopher.
All right. Well, see, we were kind of talking about this earlier, and I was mentioning the Ullman trials, which, if we believe that legend to be true, if any of you know about it, then that is probably the original cardistry competition. But for the sake of, of truth, I'll jump into what I remember being the earliest competition. If you're a really like OG cardist listening, you might remember if like Technique had tournaments or anything like that, or like United Cardists. I'm not sure if they did. The earliest one that I could think of was CDM, which was Cardistry Deathmatch, which was hosted in 2011. And I don't really remember how that one was judged because I kind of just caught the tail end of it. But then the big one that came in the next year in 2012 was World Cardistry Championship. Or it might have been 13. It was one of those years. And that the judging panel was Dan and Dave, Alejandro Portela from the QSO, and Rama Dimasatra, who was a really great cardist that sadly doesn't do a lot of stuff anymore. But he was based in Southeast Asia somewhere. I want to say Indonesia, maybe. But they were the judging panel, and Rama had won CDM the past year, so he was put on as a judge. And then, Dan and Dave and Alejandro really need no introduction. And that was judged in the bracket style that we know from CCC today. And for the final round, it was sort of like Cardistry, the Cardistry Con vote, because they had a community vote. And it was actually a really big deal because the community vote split a tiebreaker that the judges had. And so that was a pretty big deal at the time. And throughout the rounds they would give feedback, and it seemed pretty good. And I think it was the feedback that they gave was really different from the kind of feedback you see today in CCC, because you had 4 cardists who were some of the OG cardists for the whole art form, who'd been doing it for years and years and years already. I mean, back in like 2013, some of the original progenitors of the art. And so, yeah, and then over the next few years, there was not a whole lot. There was the International Cardistry Open, which was like a Facebook competition. ICO, you might know it as. And I know Jaspers judged one year. I kind of forget who the other judges were, but it was a similar kind of thing. But the way that they implemented community voting was really interesting, because they had sort of like had a grand winner, if you could say, that won, who won the competition, but then they also had like a crowd favorite who the community voted on as their favorite, and then they would win something else. And that championship was actually interesting because it was a lot different from how it was today, because today, the contestants just have all kinds of like, they don't really have any restrictions, I guess. I think in earlier CCCs, they had some restrictions, like you had to do an uncut or something, but those don't really exist anymore. And in ICO, in some rounds you were given a move and you had to expand on that, or like a mechanic, you had to build on that. Or you had to like have a certain constraint, like it had to be an uncut, or it had to be, this long or something like that. And then it was basically just CCC. And I'm assuming that a lot of people who are listening know, the ins and outs of CCC. But it's kind of gotten a little more loose over the years in terms of rules. And I think the feedback has definitely gotten a lot more, subjective and stuff like that. And we'll cover all these issues in this episode. But that's basically the history of what I personally remember. And there have been, some other small competitions, and for some rounds, especially if it was earlier rounds, you wouldn't even get feedback. You would just they would post a list of the winners, and you were either on it or you weren't. So yeah, that's basically my experience with judging over the last 6-7 years. Yeah.
Nice, thank you. All right, so that's some history with the judging. and history with competitions that we've had. And I suppose nowadays, especially for new cardists like myself, it's CCC or nothing. I see a few small ones trying to pop up and make it into the scene, but they're a little bit smaller, and they're trying to be more inclusive to people like me and people like Stan and Christopher of different skill levels that aren't the best of the best, or what, how, not that there is a best.
At least perceived as the best.
Yes,
of the best.
there we go. Thank you. The perceived best of the best. So we're going to move on and talk about the problem of objectivity with judging and judges. And what Christopher just said is kind of what we're looking at, right? Like the perception of what is the best, the perception of what is good in cardistry. And is there objectivity in cardistry at all? When you judge it, when you look at it, when you watch it?
Like
There should be, but there isn't.
Let's go with Stan. Tell me about it.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, Christopher already said it, but I mean, there should be, but there is no real objectivity. I mean, it's almost purely based on like how you feel personally about it, and not really about like, okay, we have certain rules we follow. It's basically just, also comparing to CCC, which we also go in late, but the overall problem really is that there are certain aspects, or like how I see it at least, there are certain aspects which should be like considered in order to give it like some sort of objectivity. And I mean, if you look at all these problems we have with judging, it's like they all fall into these categories in the end. Like, for example, we have you could have one aspect you should consider, which would be performance. You could have like the difficulty of the cut, how the originality, all the stuff could play into judging. And in the end, which, like I said, we will get more in depth when we go to the Cardistry section. In the end, all the problems we have, like I already said, go down to these. Like, it's either not really having this certain aspect in mind when it comes to judging, or it's either misvaluing it over like some aspect over another one, which is, for example, moment-based moves over structured / motion-based moves.
Yeah, and I was just about to bring that up. Is that was something that I saw, I think it was 2 days ago, on Pat's Instagram story, Patrick Varnavis. Somebody asked him a question, and it was moment-based moves or motion-based moves. Which do you prefer? And he put motion, and you can kind of see that in the way that his judging preference was in this CCC. When you look at Leo versus Gallock, is, for me, when I watch Gallock, again, little disclaimer before we get too far into it, but this is all our opinions and perceptions, and this is kind of a perfect example of judging cardistry, right? We're going to be sharing our opinions on what we see, and they're not right and they're not wrong, because we're talking about the objectivity right now of it and the subjectivity, which is all of cardistry. But anyways, Patrick was the only one who voted for Leo, who is I'm sure everybody would agree, is a motion-based cardist. His cuts are motion-based. There isn't this one insane mechanic and concept in the middle, or like Gallock and Lars, there's a lot of stuff in their videos that's very just the one mechanic, just the one concept being shown. That's a huge moment. That's something wild that happens, and it's very, to put it one way, it's very layman friendly, and anybody can appreciate what's happening in it. But with Leo, I mean, he said it many times himself. He's a cardist. He creates
Right.
for Cardist to appreciate and enjoy what he's doing. He's not creating for laymen. He doesn't care, which I think that motion versus moment based cardistry, that's a big separation between the two, not just what it looks like, but who it's for and who can appreciate it. I don't know if Gallock and Lars are doing cardistry with that in mind to appeal to laymen, but it's easy to see that it does, and it can appeal to laymen, which I think brings up another bias within the judging of, hey, this is so easy to understand. I don't have to think about it to understand, like, that was a cool move or concept that this person did. But you have to rewatch somebody like Leo's video a bunch of times to keep breaking down each cut and see the complexity and depth and thought process of those cuts, which for some people prefer that and some people prefer the other. Neither one is better. I personally prefer Leo's because it's so inspiring, and it's almost mind-blowing how much thought is put into these cuts, and you see something new every time you watch it, and you can appreciate something new in every single cut every time you watch it.
Well, and going back to the objectivity thing, that's actually an example of some objectivity that's actually in the championship. Like, sometimes it almost seems like the judges are looking for what laymen would like. It's very interesting because, like, how should I say this? They'll moment-based moves, and like we mentioned, moment-based moves are just kind of becoming more popular. So it's almost like the judges are just sort of acting as lay people. Like what is most impactful just overall. But I think the problem is that on the other side of the coin, where these motion-based or these structure-based moves are concerned, these really intricate, stuff that we see from like Leo and Sib, that kind of gets swept under the rug, and it doesn't get a lot of feedback because the judges are really subjective when it comes toward that, but they're really objective when it comes to like lay people friendly moves. And I think that's because, to a certain degree, we have a better idea of what a layperson friendly move is over what like a cardist friendly move is, because we all know what lay people react to: springs, fans, yada yada.
Yeah.
But it's a lot more difficult to have kind of objective rules in place for what cardists appreciate. But I think there can be. I think we're still, like we talked about in the last episode, we're still developing those rules. We're still figuring out, what genres of cardistry there are, what the rules are. But I think for now, that's making the competition suffer because the judges aren't able to adequately judge all of the cardistry equally, at the same level. They're just not able to, and the whole thing suffers as a result.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Let's use that as a transition to qualifications of judges, because that's a great point to end on, to transfer into that. Is, again, another disclaimer for this section is we're not trying to be the voice of this is how it has to be or this is the way it should be. We're the voice of, we need to talk about this because it's important, and not only that, it's fun to talk about. So
yeah, right. Sorry, I just wanted to add something here, and it's like, so if someone has a problem with what we're saying here, like, always feel free, like, to either contact me, and I think, like, I also speak for you guys in that, where you can contact us and like have really like a constructive conversation about it. You don't have to like go out and try to write us some messages about like how, I don't know, how you don't like or how you think that we're like some dudes who are like really toxic, or I don't know, just message us. I mean, like we can all have like normal down to earth conversations about this topic, and
yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
And feel free to message the NDA page, because we did get the Instagram back, by the way. I should have mentioned that at the beginning, but we all are on that page, and we look at the messages and we all respond to them. So if you want to send it to the page, you can hit all three of us at one time. Much easier. But I'm saying, again, this is just our opinions. It's made to start discussion, and we're gonna talk. We're gonna mention that every single episode, just as a reminder.
Have a disclaimer at the bottom.
Yeah.
Like,
so right down there, this is what this podcast is for: is to create conversation. You don't have to agree with anything we say, and that's fine. We just want you to go out and talk about it. You could talk, like Stan said, you could talk with us about it if you want. Hit us up in the DM, slide in there.
Don't take what we say as like gospel. It's not. But I know a lot of people do treat the CCC judges like that, because they're all, qualified or something. I don't know. That might be a segue into the next.
Yeah. So let's go straight into it.
I was trying to transition well from that little discussion.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. All right.
Perfect.
Let's go with Christopher this time. If you want to start us off with what should be the qualifications, what are the qualifications now? Do you feel like? And another point to throw in there is, are these old cardists? Are these new cardists? And which one should we have for these types of competitions in 2019 and onward?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. The qualification thing is fascinating just from a timeline aspect, because cardistry, at least in this form, really only started in the mid 2000s. We'll even say early 2000s. We'll give it some leeway there. But we're at the point where we're able to go to a convention and meet the progenitors of the art, these people who, like Dan and Dave, or like even like Chris Kenner, like we can go to CardistryCon and meet them. Like you can meet the guy who invented like the most impactful two-handed cut in the world in the art form. And that's just insane. And so it's not like we can have a painting contest today and just bring on Van Gogh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But cardistry, it is like that. It's like, it is the equivalent of that. And people who are, doing cardistry 100 years from now are going to get that that luxury. And so from that point, it's a fascinating aspect, because I think because cardistry is moving so rapidly, I think the qualifications are kind of changing rapidly, because I think it used to be just like, it would be people like Dan and Dave or Jaspis judging, who had these credentials of either winning big competitions or just being really impactful, like doing a lot, not only being good at art at cardistry, but doing a lot to impact it. Like with Dan and Dave, just all the stuff they put out, Chris Kenner inventing civil. I mean, he was never a judge, but I'm just saying. Or, you even have people like, Cardistry Touch, who've been doing it for years and years and years and have released so much stuff, so many moves, so many tutorials, videos. They've contributed a lot, so they're not just, talking out their asses. But it does bring up an interesting point, because we kind of need to think about, well, has anyone really thought about the qualifications for judges? Because I think for some competitions, especially the smaller ones, some of the people don't really have qualifications. People are just going to these competitions because they're competitions, because they're something to do. And there is a problem of old versus new, because you have people who, were part of the initial movement of cardistry, like Dan and Dave, who started cardistry pretty much. And then you have people who are really, really innovating it right now. And I think there needs to be a good mix of those. And I really wish that they would bring back the sort of the concept of like, oh, you won last year's championships, you can be a judge this year. I think that's a great way of ensuring that there's someone who's really contemporary on the judging panel. But I think for the most part, it's not like people like Dan and Dave are going to be out of touch with the community, right? Like, they're still very much in the community. Maybe they're not doing videos or decks, or they're still doing decks, but they're not doing like videos or like tutorials anymore, but they're still in the community. So it's not like they're irrelevant, really.
Yeah.
People just perceive them to be, because they're not, part of anyone worldwide, I guess. But I do think that it helps to have judges on the panel like Patrick, maybe, who are still really valued by people who cardists today look up to. So I feel like when I'll kind of end on this, I feel like when talking about qualifications for judges, it shouldn't necessarily be experience, but instead the amount of impact that you have. And I think that's why someone like, Noel, regardless of what you think of him as a cardist, would make a good judge, because he's done so much to grow the community and has just made such a huge impact. And, so many artists value what he has to say. And, someone else who might, I can't think of any examples, but just someone else who might be really experienced but just hasn't done a lot, maybe like me, I guess, wouldn't make for a great
Same.
judge, because I just don't have, I'm not speaking from a place where people will take my word, I'm not speaking from a place where people will value what I have to say. So I think that plays into it a lot. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just how it is in all art forms. You're not going to trust someone that you've never heard of, no matter how experienced they are. But yeah, I really would like to see just more thought put into the construction of the judging panels. And I mean, we can definitely talk about that later with like CCC and stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, that was a good point. Also... Sorry, go ahead, Stan.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say it was a good point.
Yeah, that was a good point. No, but it's like from my point of view, what I find like fascinating or like unique about cardistry is that regardless of how long you do it, you can still like, how to say it, you can like from a like in terms of qualification, you could still be, at least for me, you could still be qualified a good judge if you just have the fundamentals and just like show that you put that you put thought into how a move is created, what are the certain aspects you should consider, and like all the stuff around creating and like to consider with it, and all the theory behind it, like giving it a deep thought. And I feel like that's what should be there, is that people who are not really, I mean, regardless of the how big they are on Instagram or how famous they are, there should be people who maybe not that big, but have these, like I said, who have this understanding of creation,
Yeah.
And I feel that should be, like, from my point of view, that should be a qualification, like the only qualification. Well, maybe not the only qualification, but like the main qualification someone should have in order to judge a competition.
Yeah, it's kind of like you brought up to us, like Jason Cardistry. He's proven time and time again, like he understands a great deal of move creation and creative theory, how to create, how to deconstruct creations, and how to judge creations. If you follow him and look at his stories, he posts he posts often his thoughts on creation, creative theory, and he tries to have conversations with everybody about those things. He also gives great feedback, by the way. I send him most things that I create for feedback, and it's always great. But that's for a different episode. I feel like I'm on the same page with both of my co-hosts here. Is the judging panel as it stands right now for CCC is not representative of the community that's participating in it, to say it one way. You have, and I don't mean any of this in a negative or hating way. I'm just going to point it out as I see it, is you have Jaspis, who's been around for a long time, who has done a lot for the community. I think most people generally enjoy Jaspis as a person. He seems nice. I like him, but it just feels like when I watch the reaction videos and read the feedback that it's a little bit out of touch with what's happening in cardistry right now. And then you have Cardistry Touch, which, as Christopher pointed out, they've done a ton for the community, and I also can appreciate their video production quality, because that's another issue I have to pick with the judges. But when was maybe Looper 2 was the last thing they did, but before that, not much for a long time. So it seems kind of out of touch as well. Not that they don't know
Unintended.
what's, yeah. And it's not that they don't know what's going on, but why they don't give me a reason to believe that they do know what's going on. And I think that's my issue, is I don't have a reason to believe that your feedback is good. Why?
That's an interesting point because, like, Touch is a great example because both of them are really qualified. You know, they've been doing cardistry longer than some cardists have been alive. You know, just like Jaspis. But if their feedback isn't good, you know, that's not going to give you a reason to trust them further. You know, someone can have all the sort of tactical experience and, like, you know, impact needed, but they can still be bad judges. Not that I'm saying Touch is a bad judging decision, but I'm just saying that that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a good judge. I mean, it comes down to so many factors that I feel like are often ignored when it comes to making judging panels. And I feel like, especially for CCC, the biggest offense of that is not finding judges who, you know, for whatever reason, I don't know why this is happening, but it seems like the CCC judges really don't they don't give enough detail. They just skimp over so many things that need expanded on, I mean, and in great detail. And it's like, you know, this is like the world championship for cardists. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's such a disparity between kind of what you expect and what the reality is.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's as my first CCC that I'm watching like live, you know. Of course, I've went back and watched the previous ones and read through some of the stuff written about it and whatnot. But as this one is happening right now before us, this is my first one, and I will say that I'm disappointed in the judging, and that's because I've been dancing for 10 years and I'm used to a very well structured, well thought out, consistent style of judging that, you know, the community has accepted already. And cardistry is still young, and I understand this, and so it's not going to be there, and I don't expect it to be. But I do think it should. Not that it could because it will be, but it already should be better. There's so many art forms to pull and pick from and steal from when it comes to judging in competitions. There's really no excuse for me. It just seems kind of like lazy, and I'm just gonna say that. I don't care. It seems lazy. You can look at any other competitions from any art style that's been around for, you know, 40, 50 plus years, which is most art styles and competitions. And you could just steal their formula and everything would be 10 times better than it is now, just because it's already laid out. And it's not cardistry's fault, and it's not the organizers' fault for how poor I think the system is now.
Yeah.
But it is their fault for not, you know, let's look at one other thing and just take the best out of these. Like, that's so simple to me. So I don't really understand that. I can give you, contact me and I'll do it for you. I know how it works. I'm in street style popping. I'm at the level of like a Tobias. Like, this is what I've done for the past decade. I know how it works. I've judged before. I've been in worldwide competitions, international competitions for it. Even though I'm new to cardistry, I don't think any of this needs to be made and cultivated within this art style. Everybody shares everything, and that's what needs to happen. We're just flowing through these topics nicely, so we're just going to keep going with it. No need to switch topics now, but kind of what we were building up to earlier was, I mean, and what Christopher just talked about was, what are they even judging? I mean, for me, what I've had conversations about with many people now, is it feels like the people who win a CCC round is depends on how the judges, if they had a good sleep, if they had a good breakfast or not, and then they felt like I'm in a bad mood and I like my friend more, so that's who I'm picking. And I'm not gonna say like that's what's happening, but that's how it feels. Because obviously I don't know that for sure, but that's just my feeling about how the choices are being made, because the feedback is pretty poor. It's very shallow in the way, not vain shallow, but shallow as in it doesn't have much depth to it. Like we were talking about, exactly. Like we were talking about a little bit earlier. Give me a reason to care about what you have to say. I don't care how long you've been in cardistry. It doesn't matter how good you are or what you've contributed at that point. Of course, outside of this, it's of course we respect that and we want to acknowledge that because you kept the art alive. But right now, while I'm reading the feedback, give me a reason to care. Give me a reason to believe you, or else why are you there? Sort of thing. I don't feel like it takes very long to put some work into a couple paragraphs of feedback. And the other issue is like we were leading up to earlier, is what the hell are you judging on? Every judge has something, they're talking about something different in every feedback, and none of the feedback is connecting to each other's feedback. So one's about a moment in the video, which they don't even sometimes tell you which move or which moment it was. Some of it is just about the video production, good or bad. Some of it is about the motion of the cuts all together compared to the moments of somebody else, and there's no consistency. We're getting to proposed solutions at the very end of this, but we need some sort of structure. It's a little bit ridiculous to me that there's no structure still. And how long has cardistry been around, Christopher? What, 15 plus years? Yeah. And there's no structure to competitions.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that strikes me especially about this year's CCC is just the absolute thoughtlessness. And here's the thing, and this is something that I feel like maybe the judges need to understand, because, like, for all we know, all of them could have spent, like, every waking hour thinking about this, but we only see the end result. All we're seeing is, like, those paragraphs of text. And if, like, the thoughtlessness of the feedback is so striking. Like, you would expect it to just be more in depth, explaining each reason. It's almost like in a philosophical argument, if you make a premise, if you say something, you have to prove why you said that. You have to give a reason for why you said that, every single time. And you would expect something similar from the competition, but just no. And Spencer, you brought up a really interesting point, which is that when some of the judges are kind of already friendly with some of the competitors, that changes things too, especially with, like, Touch and Salvador having done a video together, like a tutorial, or like Jaspis and, like, Gowlock and
Yang.
It really creates this question of, like, how can you be sure that they're judging fairly for anybody? Because, as you said, it seems like if they had woken up differently, or if they were more or less sober, they would have judged differently. And it's such a problem. And one more thing that really struck me during this conversation is that when you were talking about it's so shallow, the thing is that, like, it's shallow enough to where it's really, it's noticeable, but it's like, I kind of just wish it was one way or the other. You know what I mean? Like, either don't be in this half-assed position where, like, you kind of give some feedback, but you don't explain anything. Like, it needs to either be like an essay of feedback, pretty much, or maybe not an essay, but like a lot of feedback, or just make it like a diving competition where you hold up numbers and that's it. It needs to be or the other. And I don't care if it's just holding up numbers. That's fine, but you have to, like, pick a side. You can't live in this middle ground, because everyone suffers when you're there. And it just goes back to that whole, like, just thoughtlessness thing, and for us seeing the end result, like Spencer said, it comes off as really just lazy. And I know that's probably not the way it is, and it's a shame that the judges are putting a lot of work into this, and they're almost misrepresenting themselves by giving their feedback. And it just, and then another thing, I'll end after this, I promise, but another thing is that this feedback isn't only helping the participants, it's helping the community. And so really, by giving half-assed feedback, you're hurting the community too, because at least I know a lot of people look at those comments and they kind of they're seeing that as the judge is saying, this is what's good, this is what's bad. And so the takeaway from that is, if I want my cardistry to be better, I'll listen to these judges and maybe, I noticed I had the same problem that contestant had, I'll fix that. And when there's no reason to it, when there's this thoughtlessness behind it, it really hurts people who would otherwise be able to learn from these comments from people who have spent years doing it, who know much more. It's like getting a mentor for free, but then, not, they just kind of give you short one sentence answers. It's a real shame.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not just that. I mean, it's also sometimes really confusing in a way that on some battles, like for example, which one do we have? We have the battle between Alvin and Gowlock, where Touch were pointing out that, like, I don't remember whose exactly it was. I think it was Alvin's performance they commented on, which they said that it was like rather poor, and the execution wasn't as good as it could be. And on the other hand, Jaspers and like for example, Jaspers, he didn't really comment on that, so he went a complete different direction on judging, and that's what for me kind of also creates a confusion. I mean, like if one judging party is commenting on it and the other one isn't, like should I fix it? Is it something that's that I should fix, or are there other things that I should consider like fixing first, or like just leaving it like that and just improve on other things? It kind of really creates some sort of confusion, and it's not just in this battle, it's in different battles where like I've, for example, heard from other contestants in there too that they were kind of confused with the feedback, because in some battles also, like, they only commented on, like Spencer already said, they just commented on the video editing and all the videography and how the video was made, and all the quality and all this stuff. And I don't see, like, it really can, like, it simply confuses me. I mean, you should give feedback on the moves. I mean, okay, this also is part of like what, like, of the competition, is to like set yourself in a proper setting, all lighting and all that stuff. But in the end, you should like have this emphasis on the moves, more on the moves than the performance, and also have like I mean, we will go to that later on with the solutions. There is a need for these guidelines, because like Christopher also said, it's completely thoughtless, and therefore, I mean, this whole confusion comes just because we have no guidelines,
Yeah, and the vague feedback is a reason for confusion too. If you say something vague, people are going to be like, "What did you mean?" That's a natural response, But with feedback, you have to say that to like just the air. You can't, I mean, I guess you could message the judges and like ask them, but the problem is that's not the problem. The issue is that they should be doing that in the first place.
Yeah.
Elaborate.
I have some stuff to carry to address of what Stan said. One, because I don't think any of them should be judging video. Focus on the cardistry, because that's why you're there, right? I've never seen anything spectacular from anybody on that panel except for Touch, video-wise. Touch, I don't know if they're directing and shooting and editing their own videos. I don't know. But if they are, that obviously proves they have a good vision for video production and a good technical skill for it. But I've never seen anything spectacular from Jaspis or Patrick video-wise, and that's not to say their videos are bad, but I have a college degree in video production. Like, why are they judging video when they don't know what they're they don't know what they're looking at? But that's almost separate from the point that I think there needs to be a separate one judge, even. Have somebody, I'll do it. Hit me up. I'll judge the video. Or have somebody that's bigger in the community, maybe like Adam Kirschman, creator of block playing cards. He's a professional videographer. He does that for a living professionally. Have him judge each video. It won't take him too long. He knows what's good and what's bad.
Touches like cinematography guy.
Yeah. See, have somebody like this do that, and you focus, like Stan said, on the cardistry. Because one, none of them are qualified to do it anyways, so leave it alone. I know everybody in cardistry thinks they know how to do video, but you don't. And I'm gonna say that from a place of I actually studied it, and I have a full-time job doing video, photo, and graphic design. But it's just I just don't understand why they're trying to judge so many things, and they're not qualified for that large portion of the judging that's also important. And if that's what's deciding things, then yeah, get somebody in there who knows what they're looking at and what they're talking about. And the other thing that goes along with that is, why is some of the judges talking about the video production in Yang's, and so he wins because he had somebody edit a bunch of After Effects in post-production for his video. But then you have a battle where Gallock is shooting in 240p, like the worst video. Not only is the quality terrible, the cuts are terrible. Not the cardistry cuts. I'm talking just video right now. The cuts in the video, the transitions, the way it was laid out, the motion of the camera, all of these things were terrible. It's just really poor videography.
Yeah.
And I just want to point that out as something of my opinion. And I do know that cameras are expensive. Knowledge of how to shoot video doesn't come overnight.
Sure.
All of these things, I'm speaking from a place of privilege of I have a job and income to buy a nice camera and go to school to learn these things. So I understand it's not going to be perfect all the time, but my point is the way that they're judging these things. So you can't put Yang through for having a professionally produced video, and then put Gallock through for having something that I could have shot 10 years ago better. I don't understand that. It doesn't make sense, and Gallock shouldn't have made it through, in my opinion, because of that. Like, it's ridiculous. I don't know what's going on in the judges' heads. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but that again brings up the question. I mean, to what degree should the video, so like the production itself, the video production itself, to what degree should we consider it when we judge it? Because, like you said, there should be like a different judge to do that. But it's also that we are there for the cardistry, on the other hand.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, like, it's really difficult to say that you are there for cardistry on one part, and then you come with this argument that Gallock shouldn't go through. I mean, like, it's I see the point, but it's like a little bit conflicting.
Well, that was my point, is because the judges were conflicting about it, about how they gave the feedback, and what they were emphasizing their judgment on, is that you can't judge heavily for video production on one and then put somebody else through and disregard the video quality altogether. It shouldn't work like that. And I don't think any of us have an answer to how much video should be weighed, although my opinion is it should be weighed pretty heavily, because cardistry is the media that we express it through as video. And that's one of the most important parts of cardistry is, I mean, how we show it. And we don't do this in live, it's not really a thing.
But at the same time, it's sort of a catch-22, because the problem is your average cardist isn't going to have any production knowledge whatsoever. And I mean, that is, like you said, sort of an accessibility thing. It's kind of tough. But at the same time, I think it's about putting more emphasis on learning video production, because it is the medium, going forward. Like, if you want to do this, you don't have to have like a red camera, but you should be able to work with what you have and know how to utilize it to the best of your ability, and that's just not something we're placing a huge emphasis on. And that's a problem too.
You can shoot great video with your phone. Any modern phone made within the last 3-4 years, you can shoot great video, and you can learn, not for free because you need internet, but if you have internet, you can go on YouTube and you can learn to make amazing video. You don't have to go to school for this.
Yeah.
So for me, there's very little excuse to have a decent video that is easily digestible in Cardistry.
Yeah, not great, but decent.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be professional.
Yeah, no one's
It doesn't have to
expecting
be Yang.
that. Yeah. And it brings up an interesting thought because I kind of had like a realization that like kind of plays into this whole guideline thing that we're talking about and we'll talk about. But and this might seem a little counterintuitive, but I'll explain. It's almost like the judges just considered each individual matchup at a time. And what I mean by that, I mean obviously they're going to, right? But I don't think they had like an overarching kind of just thought about what they're judging throughout the whole competition. I think they judged the strengths and the weaknesses of each individual competitor on each matchup, and they didn't look for the same strengths and weaknesses throughout the competition. They just focused, like Gallock versus Leo is a great example, right? They focused on Gallock's moment-based stuff and Leo's motion-based stuff, but that sort of criteria that they made for that specific matchup wasn't going for any other matchup in the competition. So it's like they have tunnel vision when it comes to each matchup, and they're only judging what they see based on that. And that's why I think the Lucas and Lars one was one of the toughest brackets, because you had two really quite similar approaches, and the judges were kind of, they were nonplussed because they were like, oh, we're judging two similar things. And when you have something that's so different, you can easily kind of say, well, I like this one better because they're so different. You're going to side one way or the other. And that's definitely a problem because since there are no guidelines, there's nothing to keep the judges from being consistent, or they're not consistent throughout the competition. And that's a huge, huge problem. I mean,
yeah. And I think that's why it's so important to see. My solution, or one of the solutions, is we need a rubric, right? Most of us know what a rubric is from school. You have your categories of every single thing that you're judging, and you assign a maximum point value, and then each judge puts their points out of that value, and then each point means you meet a certain standard. So you write a standard for your 1, your 2, your 3, your 4, or 5, however many points you want to assign to each category. 5 being excellent, flawless, whatever, and 1 or 0 being did not meet any requirements, was bad, it wasn't present in the video. And I think this would help a lot. And I think if they got together a bunch of people on a voice chat or at CC and sat in a room for a couple hours, they could make this, and then it would be established for a very long time and change it over time, and it wouldn't be a big deal. I don't think it would be very hard for a bunch of experienced, thoughtful cardists to do. But I also wanted to point out that I know, especially myself, and being very hard on the judges, and I think it's because a lot of these things are so common sense, but I also understand that these might be some of the only people that are willing to put themselves out there to judge this competition, where you're going to face scrutiny no matter what. You're going to face like these criticisms no matter what, and you're going to face much worse ones from a lot of other people, which you see on Instagram constantly during CCC because of all the little fanboys and fangirls out there. But I do think I do want to thank the judges for even doing it, or else we wouldn't have CCC, or it would be worse than it is now, because there's still quality judges and somebody has to do it, and nobody's perfect. So I do appreciate the judges and what they're doing. We're really just bringing up the things that we see that could be changed today. Like, everybody could get on a voice call and change it right now, and it would be better.
I think it's worth mentioning also that if you just by listening, you can tell that a lot of things we're critiquing are things that are just inherent in the structures of how competitions are judged. Like, it almost doesn't matter who the judges are. It's just that these issues of qualification, of guidelines, matter no matter how big the competition is, whether it's CCC or whether it's a smaller competition. These are just kind of rules that for some reason Cardistry hasn't applied, that literally almost every other art form that has competitions has used for decades or even centuries.
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
Go ahead, Stan.
No, I was just like about to say that what you said with the rubrics or like the guidelines and all that stuff, I feel like one problem would or might be is that it's difficult to do that when you compare, like, for example, well structured moves, like Leo's, and you have stuff like which is like mechanically like really really thought out, like really original, like for example them who James Chesmore, for example. The thing with his performances are his ideas. They're so original and they're so crazy and really hard, and they are kind of messy sometimes, And the problem which I see there is if you put an emphasis, or like if you have this thing that you judge on the smoothness or like the how clean the cuts look, should there, I mean, like that there's a little conflict between like originality and, I mean, is it even possible like to do such original and hard moves like that clean?
Well,
like for example Leo with his moves, or
Well, here's how I see this working out well still, is because when you have all of these different sections that you're judging on, James would score high in originality, right? And how hard the move is, but he might score lower in cleanliness, but somebody else might score higher in cleanliness, but lower in how hard the move is or how unique it is. So in that sense, it would balance out, and whoever does better in all the categories is going to win.
Yeah, I was going to put an emphasis on that too, because like, when we're looking for the winner of the competition, like it should be, I mean, and this is not really, I mean, I think for the past, at least for last year was the case with Luis, but you want someone who can do, as much cardistry as possible. Ideally, you want someone who can kind of be a master of everything, and who's at least can dabble in everything, right? You don't want someone who's just a fan or winning the competition, for example. And that's nothing against fanning. It's just that when we're coming to a competition like that's not, it's not a niche competition. It's very much just like the general, best cardist alive type competition, I guess. You want someone who's well-rounded. That's a great term. Well-rounded in their portfolio of cardistry, in their repertoire. And the thing with the rubric is that I think it kind of goes along with how that naturally goes anyway, because you have all these different aspects, and you don't want someone who's just shooting high up in one category and is low in the others. You want someone who can pretty much average it out. And so I think it's a great kind of linear way of just kind of doing what we're already doing.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. We did. Sorry. I would like to bring up a couple examples of how judges score in dance, because that's what I'm familiar with. Just to give an example to people who don't have experience with competitions in other art forms. We're going to take popping first, which is a street style, no choreography and whatever in battles. And usually you have 3 judges, just like, I guess CCC technically has 4, but there's 3 scores. In popping, there is no explanation. Obviously, when it happens, it's a battle, and then each judge points to the person that won. And that's kind of how, like, I think Christopher was saying, it's like, show the number and then put it down, or give an essay, because cardistry, you can't boil a 2-minute video of Leo's cuts down into one paragraph. That's not a thing. Like, there's way too much there. That's like One paragraph barely suffices for one of his cuts. But so each judge is considering things. The difference between a lot of dance styles and cardistry is that there is objectivity in dance styles because there is requirements to doing those styles. So in popping, you have to hit, and you have to hit on beat, and that's the main foundation of the style regardless of anything else. And if you can't do that, you've lost automatically. We don't have that in cardistry where there's something where you have to do it or else you're automatically lose. So that
clout.
Huh?
Have clout.
Have clout. Okay, that's for, we're saving that for next episode. But one, that's something that we did address is there objectivity in judging? No, there's not, but we can do a lot to create this false sense of objectivity so there's more balance, at least, within all the subjectivity.
Yeah, well, it's subjective objectivity, right? Like,
yeah,
and that's the thing is that with like this rubric, like the rules wouldn't need to appeal to some, absolute foundation of cardistry. They just have to be rules. Like it's like I don't care what the rules are, just tell me what they are so that there's some understanding to go by, because otherwise it's just so damn frustrating and it's so inconsistent. I mean, it really is a problem, and like the rules can be even arbitrary. I don't care. Or even like I said, it's either go one way or the other. Just show numbers, or like Spencer said, show the numbers you give an essay. It's like one or the other.
Yeah. I think a great example is breaking or b-boying, or as the mainstream media would call it, breakdancing. But you look at competitions like Red Bull BC1 or B-Boy World Championships or something like this, and there is a clear structure of how rounds are judged. Right. So you'll have things like originality, overall technique, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll go into basic foundations of the art as well. So how good is the footwork? How good is the top rock, up rock, down rock, power moves, consistency, how clean everything was done, how many times, or can you get through every single round without messing up, things like this. There's a whole bunch of categories, and they're all scored out of 10, and then, or they don't even need a number score. Each side is a color, red or blue, and then each judge will punch in which did it better. So which person did each category better. Even something as simple as that could be implemented. And even if you just had that, under the feedback section, you take away the word feedback and you put scoring card. And then each judge has red or blue. Each person in the bracket is a red or a blue when they battle each other. And then you'll see what each person scored on for each category, who won it. And they could further go and do numbers 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 5 with a rubric, or they could have one big category with so like 5 different things or 4 different things or whatever, where they do just the red or blue who won each one. And then all of that might be in one category that's similar, where they can write a short paragraph about their decisions or their score overall for that category for each person. Something like this. It's very simple. It's not hard to do, and I think it would give us as the viewers so much more insight and so much more trust in the judging system, which I think would be great if we could trust them, and I want to feel like I can value the decisions made and value what these cardists think, but as it stands now, I don't value the decisions made. I often feel like there's hundreds of more people who can articulate better and make better decisions, and that's just because of the conversations I've had with people and how they talk about cardistry and how they break down the videos and the movements of what they're seeing is so much better than what we're getting in that feedback section, which goes back to what Christopher said. We're just judging off of what we can see. I don't talk to any of these judges personally and ask them about these things, so I don't really know if they have the capacity to give this to us. I don't know if they even thought about it in the first place. I don't know. I don't know what's happening. We only get what we see and what we're given, so that's all we can judge on.
And it comes back to that whole like go one way or the other, and it's funny because I think the current judging system is like it's acting as if it's this really long form, like in-depth judging, but it's really, I mean, at least it comes off, right? It comes off as these judges are just kind of using a scoring system, like, just like, how do I feel today? And it's like a very quick, just like yes or no, basically. But the thing about that is when there are people like, like Jason, like we mentioned, Cardistries, or like, Beckett, for instance, or who else do we talk, or Leo even. There's people here who are, putting out such great thoughts and detail and depth and thoughtfulness in the cardistry. When the judges of the biggest competition in the world for cardistry aren't doing that, it's really a shame, because I feel like sure they could go with just the holding up the numbers, yes or no, instinctive kind of subjective feel approach, but I think there's just a lot more to it. And I think that we're denying the art from a lot of growth, a lot of innovation, and a lot of just value overall by not implementing something that's more in depth. It's like if you win a literary competition, right, you're not just going to get like a little paragraph of feedback. Like whoever's the judge is going to go in detail on like not only what they liked and disliked, but just how it was good and how it was could be improved on. And that's something that we're just definitely missing in cardistry. And it's such a shame that there are people putting out great thoughtful content and opinions on cardistry, but it's just not the judges.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and to give this another dimension, I would like to ask you guys. So I don't know if Christopher mentioned that earlier in the history part, because we were facing some technical issues. But would you guys say that you like this current system of like one-on-one battling, or would you say that, for example, what they did with the first Cardistry Con, where they had like certain criteria which should be like, for example, the length was given by the judges, and also like if this should be an uncut video or not, or like in other competitions where they had like I don't know who of you, I think Christopher pointed it out, that they had moves which they should incorporate into the video, and whoever did it the best, that's the one who got through. So what are your thoughts on that?
At first, I liked the bracket style more because, I mean, that's how WKC was structured, and it definitely kind of gives this like March Madness feel, right? And it gives a very clear progression to the finish line. But I think in terms of like what cardistry is, then that's definitely not the best option to go through. And I'm really sad that they kind of stuck with that, because the thing about that, and actually this is another kind of layer of opacity to the competition, because we don't know how they're getting paired up. Is it random? Is a third party pairing them up? Like, we don't know who, and the randomness of it being paired up means you have people who are so different going against each other. And with the old CCC format, you had that too, but on a grander scale. And so that meant that there was going to be more diversity in the people who would go through, and there was going to be just a more well-rounded lineup overall. And I think that, I think actually with Stan, what you brought up is two separate issues, because one is just like the layout of the competition, like kind of bracket versus something else, and then you also brought up the limitations, and I think those should definitely be incorporated. I mean, I think any good cardist should be able to take a theme or an instruction and run with it. Like, I really liked in I think it was 2017 where 2016 I think, where I think semifinalists had to do like a move from one of the other semifinalists, or like incorporate that somehow. Like, that's a great idea. And like those sort of curveballs, I think, would really test your quality as a cardist. I mean, because right now as it stands, you can just create like 40 moves and save up for years and then just win like Macalco did, right? But if you're throwing all these curveballs during the competition, it tests your adaptability as a card. It tests your overall, just not only your resolve, but just how, I mean, it does test your quality. If you should be able to handle anything that's thrown at you, you know, you should be able to do a video that's only fans if you need to, right? Or like a video that is over 5 minutes long if you need to, but these things just aren't brought up. And I definitely think that they should be incorporated into competitions.
For me, I think this is extremely complex, and I think I don't see it often in other art forms because I feel like I prefer the bracket system overall. I would definitely keep it like it is, except maybe I would add video time limits, because some of these decisions this year were based solely on this person made a longer video.
Yeah.
Like, it was even until the 1.5 minute mark, and then so-and-so's video went 3 minutes instead. So obviously you're going to win if you're pretty evenly matched up, but the other person has twice the content. I think it would be nice to make the decisions a little bit more... I think that would help create a more depthful decision-making process as well. If you can only put 1.5 minutes of content in this round, and then maybe the time increases per round because the judges have less to look at anyway, so they can put more thought into each video. Yeah. And then it also challenges the cardist to have more material or just better video overall as the competition goes on.
And it creates an even playing field for all the cardists.
Yeah, too. Definitely. But when it comes to, I like the concept of adding in all these like little things to change it up and whatever, but I feel like it needs to be saved for a different competition. I feel like it needs to be its own thing, because it's a totally different type of competition at that point. They're so... You have to have a totally different mindset to go into it. You have to train and practice differently for that. Because if you're just sitting at home for an entire year, saving up for Cardistry Con, and you have those 40 moves, you've crafted them specifically for this reason to compete, and you have a rough idea of how you want to layer these in videos, and you have an idea of what your videos are going to be. On the other hand, if you want to win a competition where everything's random, now you're changing how people train and practice for a year altogether, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it would be nice to have both of those competitions. Maybe one for the CCC for Cardistry Con, that's their big thing, and then on the other end of the year, 6 months later, people are working towards this competition, right? We have the same thing in popping. We have a battle called Jack of All Trades up in Canada, and each round, each contestant picks up out of a bag a piece of paper, and it has a style on it. Now for that round, you have to do that style, and then your opponent has a style they have to do, and then in the second round you switch each other's styles. And so there's things that can make this super fun, but that's one battle a year out of all battles that exist, because it's not for everybody. And if I think the bracket system gives everybody a chance to enter and become a part of it and succeed at it, while the other one is much more fun and it might appeal to a whole different type of cardist, so we can get more people involved. That's why I think it would be the best to have them both at that CCC prestige level as well. Mm-hmm. And I would personally love, while we're on it, to have battles that are hosted at the maybe beforehand for not top tier cardist, for everybody else, and then maybe the winner of that is a wild card into the big competition or something like this. I think there can be great things like this. For instance, in dance we have big competitions like Just Debut or KOD, King of Dance, or things like this, where there's battles thrown out in major cities across the world. So you have LA, New York, Paris, Montreal, Hong Kong, Beijing, Tokyo, Seoul, Korea. All of these places, they have battles throughout the year, and then all the winners meet up in one spot, and then it's a big battle of all the champions, and so you get the grand champion at the end. How cool would that be for cardistry if each country had their own competition, and then at the 6 months later, after they're all done 3 months later, you could do them all in 1 month if the scheduling is worked out very well, and then everybody has the big competition at the end for the grand champion. I think that would be so dope. There's so much potential in this community.
Like the Olympics, right? Because you have each country represented.
Yeah, exactly.
That country, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be
something
cool.
That I realized that we have not even considered about these competitions is not even the judging, but what you said about who gets in the competition made me think about this. What about how people are selected for the championship, the auditioning, because how is that being judged, and how should that be judged?
Yeah, that's insane to me. It's so flawed. But sorry, go ahead, Stan.
No, I just wanted to add something because what Christopher pointed out earlier is also like really interesting to think about, because if you have these things where you limit people in, for example, that they have to use a certain mechanic or like a certain style, what this would give not just people the chance to participate or like to succeed, which like have these tons of moves saved up. It would kind of also make it like an equal chance for people who are not that long into cardistry, in my opinion, because they also themselves, they could like, that there's no, they don't have to have like a lot of moves. It's just like they kind of equal with the others, just simply because they have the same how do you call it, the same start, the same beginning point.
Yeah.
And without putting them into different skill levels, like for example ICO, where they have veterans, beginners, and intermediates. There you could like mix them all together, and they still kind of have the same chances.
Yeah. It's interesting to me too that at least for the audition.
One second.
Oh, sure.
I'm gonna let you continue, but I'm just gonna let you know I'm gonna run to the restroom real quick. But okay. you two go ham on this topic. I'll be right back.
You on the podcast? Okay, maybe not. I don't know. I think it's interesting to me how, at least for the auditioning for CCC, and maybe this isn't the case because this actually brings up another point, but presumably the judges are picking people based on 15 seconds of cardistry,
right.
Which I don't know if they go through the contestants' pages and kind of look at their portfolio, but if they're only being judged on that 15 seconds, then that really can be misleading. And I think we saw that, especially with like, just some contestants who get picked based on that, and then they clearly don't live up to the hype that they set for themselves or the image that they created for themselves. I think a lot of people felt that way about some of the contestants this year. Because you could have somebody with a really, really strong 15 seconds to impress, and then who just like the first round is just like underwhelming AF. It's a really big problem. And then like on the other hand, if you are going back at people's pages and looking at their accounts and stuff like that, because I know a lot of people delete their posts for CCC, but I don't know if the judges look at that or not. And that brings up a different question, because if the judges are not only judging on the 15 seconds but also their previous material, then that adds another layer to things. And it's like we need not only guidelines and some structure on what is being judged, but we need transparency on how it's being judged too, because that's why people are deleting their posts, and why people are being so secretive about moves now. And no one wants to share stuff, no one's making videos. They want to be saving up to win CCC, which might as well just stand for Cardistry Cloud competition at this point. It's so interesting to think about that, like how people are even getting selected in the first place. And that just goes back to not having guidelines for just how people are getting selected. I mean, I know there has to be like an audition process, but there needs to be, some structure for the judges saying, hey, this is how we're going to select people, and how we're going to judge them from here on out.
Yeah, well, I see your point, but I mean, on the other hand, what I think about, I think it's not that bad because I mean, you should also have like the ability to like like to kind of compress like your moves or like y- I don't know how to express that, but like if you know if you're a good cardist, you should be able to like impress someone within these 15 seconds. So I feel like this is a really good criteria to sort out people who are, people who can. Um, oh man, that's really difficult for me
It's a
to put it in.
complicated topic. It's a very
Yeah,
complicated.
not just that. It's just like I'm like having trouble with expressing it in English, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, well, I mean, you can at least say it takes skill to showcase something in 15 seconds, and also like that, which has quality and impact, and like all
Yeah.
has this all around package, you know?
Yeah, it's sort of, I don't know. It's funny to me that that is actually the one round with like limitations and like certain criteria that you have to meet. You have to impress someone in 15 seconds, and that brings with it a whole conglomeration of just limitations. But the thing is, after that, they're basically like, okay, no rules. Do whatever you want. And it's so different. So it's like the 15 seconds to impress sets you up not for how CCC is going to be, but just for that round. It's almost like a separate competition, and it's it's crazy because like I said, it can just be misleading, and it's really, the barrier of entry is so high, but then the standards of judging are so low, and like there are no guidelines, so it really creates this like off kilter dichotomy of having high barrier of entry to start with, and then afterwards it's like it's a roller coaster. You don't know what you're going to be judged on, you don't know how the judges are going to feel, and it's insane.
Yeah, um I don't know of any ways to fix that issue because I mean this is how most visual art things are done, right? Like almost all of dance there's preliminary rounds. And a lot of
Yeah.
preliminary rounds run similar to this where, well, not exactly similar because you're doing everything in the moment. You don't have time to think about it. You get a number and then they call out you one at a time in front of the judges for 15 seconds and you dance and then they score you and then next person, next person, next person. Or it's 3 to 10 people all at one time that are dancing for a minute and the judges walk around and score people.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's similar in a way, although it takes more skill because you're doing it in the moment, and you have to do that all right then because they're freestyle dances. They're not planned out like cardistry, as you don't choreograph something. But I think it's a
Yeah.
huge issue that this 15-second thing because one, I don't know how some of the people even got in to CCC this year with their entries because they were so bad. And then there were some people who had great entries but weren't chosen. And it just feels like maybe the judges know of these people and they've seen their stuff before. So they're like, I know this person has potential. And even though their 15 seconds didn't show that potential, and you can see Jaspis's reactions to some of them is not very big, and then he has great reactions to other ones. Like, for instance, he only stopped and replayed a very few videos on his reactions, and Christopher's was one of them. And he had nothing but great things to say about it, yet he didn't have that great things to say about Lars, but Lars got in, and his entry was so underwhelming. It kind of hurt. It hurt me to see that Lars got in, but there was 5 or 6 people at the time I could name off the top of my head that had much far better entries.
Yeah.
And that's not,
I mean,
well, I just want to point out this has nothing to do with the state of CCC and like how the rounds went and how Lars performed in CCC. It has to do with the initial judging of the 15 seconds, and
Right.
these judges have to consciously be thinking about eliminating their own bias, and they need to be judging the 15 seconds to each 15 seconds.
yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, that's exactly what I wanted to say. It's so yeah.
Yeah, like why did Gallock get in? Why did Yang get in? I'm not questioning. Those questions weren't to say that I think they shouldn't have gotten. I want to know why, because Yang's video was like a combo flourish of just twirling cards, while some other people had 5 cuts in there and some great moments and some cool stuff, but they didn't get in. I love Yang, but I just want to know what was the reasons why between those two types of 15 seconds, why did that get chosen? I don't understand. And it goes back to
no guidelines.
Yeah.
Which I think is the biggest, most glaring problem that we can point to. And I don't want to say, we're definitively right about everything, but I cannot think of any cardist who would disagree with the fact that adding guidelines would make it with adding guidelines. I feel like no one would say that adding guidelines would make it worse. No one would disagree with that. At least I hope not. At the very least, it would create just more clarity, more transparency, more understanding in the whole issue.
Yeah, even if the decisions for CCC would not change for this competition with guidelines, I still think it would be better with guidelines, because at least I wouldn't sit here like, why the hell did that happen? Like, at least I'd be able to see, even if I still disagree. Guidelines don't mean we have to agree with them just because they're there, but at least I can see why and what went through the judge's head a little bit more to help me understand it.
Right.
I don't think it's healthy to agree with everything the judges say or agree with everything one cardist says or thinks. I think that's how you make the community worse. But I think it's important to acknowledge and have validation on why these people are saying and thinking that the way that they do, so we can at least have the understanding. And this is how we help, form our own opinions and how we look and judge things ourselves. If we don't get the insight from others, how well can we form our own opinions? So I would just love to be able to know what they're thinking, or just on a scale of 1 out of 5, what they're scoring each part of the video and each part of the set.
Like you said, what the judges are deciding now is deciding the future of cardistry, deciding people's taste. It has a lot of impact, and it seems like a really disproportionate amount of effort to impact.
Yeah, definitely. We didn't really get to touch on that much, but how I felt about this, and as a new cardist, it stuck out to me right away during CCC, was what these judges are choosing is, it could define the future of cardistry. And how it's going right now, I can't say that I'm excited for that, because it's not something that I enjoy in cardistry. I don't enjoy just watching a video of single concepts and moments. It's so boring to me. I want to watch a fleshed out, super in-depth video like Leo's, where it's beautiful production value, beautiful in-depth cuts. The way that the cuts are put out throughout the video makes sense. I want rewatchability. And so for some of us, we prefer that. For some of us, we prefer, something like Lars or Gallock, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But I don't know. I don't think the judges take into account that what they're deciding on a whim for them, after they eat cereal or something in the morning, is defining cardistry for the rest of us. So I think
something we really didn't get to talk about too, and I just want to point out, is that I think when it comes to that issue of objectivity that we addressed earlier, and then when we're talking about this issue too, I think that judges need to be able to evaluate styles that are not their favorite, or like not the styles that they do, because you could have like someone who's really just like specializing in like XCM or something like that, or like isolations or a particular style. And if that's not your style, you still need to be able to look at that and say, okay, I know what makes XCM good. I know the foundations of that and all that. And so I'm going to judge not based on my subjective feeling, but based on, the quality of that relative to its own art form. And I think that that's something that, like a lot of people aren't doing. I think like if you're not like a fan, or, you're not going to really judge fans adequately. And I think at least with the current judging lineup, I mean, there is some diversity, but I definitely feel that it excludes a lot of cardists and it excludes a lot of just room for growth because obviously the judges know best what they do best. They're like, but that just creates a problem. So I wish there was more objectivity in terms of just being able to see something and say, I don't like that personally, but I know that it's a good cut. And this goes back to needing guidelines, needing rules. You need to be able to dislike something, but still put it through because it's objectively, or at least relative to the subjective objectivity that you've set forth for yourself in the rules. Need to be able to put that through. I think that would be a big step forward in these kinds of competitions.
Yeah, I think you hit a very important point. As like, we don't care what you like. We don't care what you like, Patrick and Jaspis and Touch. Like, that's not the point of this. Who cares what you like? We want you to judge who did better in these two videos. And we want reasons why you think that. I don't care if you like this fan. I don't care if you like this type of cut or not. Nobody cares about your style at this point. Nobody cares what you've done at this point. This is about the competition at hand, and it's about the two people who put in videos that you're judging right now. Yeah. I don't care if you're friends with them or have known them your entire life or don't know them at all. It's just like Christopher said, like, you need to be able to judge every single style and cut on its own merit, regardless of what you do or what you like. And that's very hard to do. That wasn't meant to like criticize and say, wow, you guys suck as judges. I mean, I think the judging is very poor. There's no hiding that. But all the judges that are there right now are, I'm sure, are more than capable of doing this, but you have to be conscious and you have to be thinking of it every single time you sit down to judge something. It's not as easy as it sounds. And I don't want to... I'm going to be harsh because I think it's important to be very straightforward with these issues to get them across and to have people have conversations about them. But again, like, it's not an easy job. The judges have a terribly hard job, and they're in a terrible position of where no matter what, somebody's going to have an issue with what they do. Then that's inevitable. And I wouldn't want to be in that position personally. I'll do it though. You'll hit me up. But no, I'm just playing. But I think that's something to always keep in mind as we are the spectators and viewers of this competition, is that the judges are doing what they have to do. It doesn't, and they have a certain amount of clout around them already and whatever. But what this podcast is about is that we don't have to be satisfied with it just because of who they are or the position that they're in. We as a community have to create the conversations and change things that we don't like and that aren't good systems, like CCC judging or CCC. This is not to say that we can't have an appreciation for it as well. I love CCC. I looked forward to this since the day I started. This was the main thing I was looking forward to because I want to see some dope videos. But we still need to criticize and have conversations and talk about more constructive ways to have these things, so it grows for the future. It becomes better for the future, and it never stops becoming a bigger and better force in cardistry that benefits all of us, right?
It benefits the community, which is something we'll cover in our next episode.
Yes. We have hit an hour and 40 minutes about, so I would like to wrap this up. That's with technical difficulties and whatnot, so hopefully it's not that long in the end.
It's been a long.
Yeah, so closing out, I do want to say that I can't speak for everybody on this, that we all greatly appreciate the support we've received so far. I didn't think we'd get as many listens and views on our episode 0 launch. It's so great to see. We really do sincerely appreciate it. We appreciate everybody who kind of helped promote the channel and the Instagram, even when somebody decided that they didn't like us because we were making a podcast about cardistry. They decided to say that many toxic, rude things to me personally, while also saying the community is beautiful. So I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, and also in the end, we get what we want. I mean, people start thinking about it, although we might disagree with how they express it, they at least start thinking about it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is all for a good end goal, end game. And we have to go through a lot of different processes that might suck or might be annoying or irritating, but you know, that's the fun of it. Have conversations. But again, yeah, thank you. Our Instagram is back up, thankfully. And I think I would at this point like to talk about our next episode and our guest next episode.
Yeah.
I think that'd be nice to kind of let everybody know what we're planning. So next episode, which it's going to be the pre-Cardistry Con episode because it's the weekend before Cardistry Con. We're going to address some things that, fortunately for myself, I'm going to go be able to see how that plays out at Cardistry Con because I do live in Portland. But episode 2 is titled, "There is never anything negative about the community." That is a quote by somebody in the community recently. And then, so it's, "There's never anything negative about this community. A look at negative aspects of this community." So for this episode, for next episode, we're going to be talking about the community, toxicity, our own experiences in it, some issues that some of us have that I personally have with a bigger name Cardist, and them talking about how positive the community is and the place of privilege they're speaking from. But most importantly, Kevin Ho is going to be our guest for next episode. He recently decided to bow out of the Cardistry community because of how toxic it is. So I think this is going to be extremely interesting. It's going to be spicy. It's going to be fire. I know Kevin has a lot to say about clearing up why he left and the things that he's said about the Cardistry community. He thinks a lot of it has been misinterpreted. So I'm very interested for him to be able to share and have a platform to share to everybody else how he feels. Kevin has a great mind for all of this. He's very, very well spoken. So this is going to be a great episode. Can't wait. I may try and have it to be a live episode as well. So hopefully that can work out. Hopefully we can do something like a YouTube live. But either way, it's going to have Kevin Ho. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait. It's the weekend before Cardistry Con. Get everybody thinking. Go ahead.
Also, I just make a short disclaimer, and we'll have to say this next episode because, like, we've gotten some messages from people saying like, "Oh, you're just focused on the negative things." And here's the thing with our podcast, and especially this next episode, right? The Cardistry community is not 100% toxic. None of the three guys you're looking at right now think that. But in order to make the community a better place, we do have to talk about the negative things in order to improve them. I mean, maybe we'll have an episode on, all the positive aspects, and we definitely could fill up several episodes with that. I wouldn't have stuck with it for 7 years if I, just hated it so much. But I just want to put that disclaimer there that we do not, we don't feel left out of anything. We don't think the community is just cancer. It's not a cancer come unto, we love it, but we want to fix the problems because we see that they're existent, and so many other people do. And I think we're just finally, developing a platform to say those things. So please, I don't want you to take away from this that we think it's all negative. We just have to talk about some of the negative stuff in order to make it even better than it already is.
Definitely. 100% agree with that. All right, with that is our closing. We are leaving until next week. We can't wait for the Kevin Ho one to come out, so be ready, and we're out.